Hey, Pollyanna.
What did you call me?
I said you look like Pollyanna. Okay, ladies.
It has great acting and a really good plot. Welcome back to Dark Blood Mechanical. This video is going to be a little bit different than what I usually do. This is going to be a DIY project kind of thing. I will rarely be uploading this kind of stuff, but this is something pretty cool that I thought that I would share with you guys. So a little bit of a backstory to this is I've always wanted to have my own personal full-blown theater. You know, projector, seats, sound system, wiring. I've always wanted to have all that, but I just never had the room to do it. I've been way too busy working on my own car, other people's cars, building projects on the side and so forth. However, that's kind of changed over the recent months. I managed to come across a projector for a price I couldn't refuse, and a lot of the other items that have just been popping up here and there for a really good price. So I've just basically been collecting a lot of the items over the past couple of months, and then also kind of been designing the way this whole system is going to be put together. All right, so here's a model of my attic, and these are some of the constraints that I have to work with. I've got a 5 meter long attic, 3 meters wide, and it's about 2 meters in height here. A couple of the constraints that we have to work with is I have a staircase right over here, which means I can't place these seats any further back. And I also have a doorway over here, so I can't really have them all the way at the back. So I've settled with having them right up front in front of the stairway. Another thing that we have to deal with is the shape of the overall attic. So because I have my rooftop over here, I've got these 45-degree angles that really limit the position of where I can place this screen and the overall dimensions of the screen as well. So due to all these constraints that I have to work with, I'm kind of limited with a screen of 102 inches, which is more than enough, and the seating distance from that is going to be about, let me see here, it's going to be about 128 inches. So I think that's more than enough. It's not too close, it's not too far, and I think that this will work out quite fine. For projector positioning, I have a range that I can work with. So the Epson projector that I have allows me to have 116 inches all the way up to 192 while maintaining an image size of 102 inches. And it's a mechanical zoom, not a digital zoom, so I don't lose pixelation by doing this. Now, I can't have it mounted here at 116 inches, and that's because it sits right above the viewers. So as we can see, I kind of have to deal with the ceiling angle over here, and so if you were to stand up, you'd have to like crouch and get underneath the projector just so that you can get downstairs or do other things. Now, the other reason why there's two projectors here right now is because the projector is going to be mounted on a 20-inch post, which is also going to be mounted on a set of rails. And what that's going to allow me to do is to shift this projector back and forth into a desired location. Now, to explain the 20-inch post position over here, I know it sounds like it's ideal to just mount the projector directly to the ceiling. That way it's completely out of the way. However, if I do that, I'm going to be forced to use the keystone feature within the projector. And if you know anything about projectors, every time you use the keystone feature, you're reducing the image quality by literally removing pixels. Because what it has to do is basically deal with the geometry of the screen by cutting away and cropping part of the resolution of the screen itself. So yes, you end up with the correct dimensions of the image, however, you're losing pixels. So with having the projector mounted, 20 inches away from the ceiling, all that means is that I'm gonna have to tilt this screen away from the wall about 3 degrees. So we can see here angle 177.29, and this is basically not going to be noticeable to the viewer. Now, for the structure of the screen, it's basically going to be made of lumber, and I'm going to use a series of springs to pull back the fabric to stretch it. And then one of the last things that I'm going to be doing is more aesthetics. This is a starlight panel that I'm going to be building. So it's going to have a series of fiber optic LEDs passing through here, and it's going to give the illusion of like the sky, where you can change the color of the stars, and it'll have a motor in there so that it'll have like a little bit of a twinkle effect. So now that we've kind of gone over the initial design, let's get started on this whole build. This is what we started with. Shaggy 1-inch thick carpet, green walls, and a white ceiling. As I tore it all apart, I also caught that the floors were bowed out of shape, so I reinforced them and re-leveled everything. I also picked out matching laminate flooring and installed it. Much better now. I built the frame of the screen using 1x4-inch lumber. And to hold everything together, I used a pocket hole jig as well as some wood glue and some brackets to reinforce. So I only screwed in the upper and lower parts of the screen for now, because I'm going to be checking for squareness before I finish tightening everything down. That way, if anything is out of square, I can kind of twist, manipulate, and then put the final screws in. Since the screen fabric will be stretched around the frame, we don't want the lumber to dig in and tear into the fabric. So I'm installing some plastic edging around the perimeter to help protect it, as well as allow the fabric to flow around the edges a lot smoother. One last touch was adding some electrical tape to the sharp corners. This next part involved my mother, so all the credit goes towards her. The fabric came in raw and it needed to be stitched around the edges in order to move on to the next step. This material is multi-layered and very difficult to work with.
There you go.
It's professional. So now we can talk a bit about projector screen material. When it comes to getting the best picture quality, the choice of material is crucial. Projector materials come in a variety of colors, viewing angles, gains, and other specs. But to simplify things, if you have a brightly lit room, you should aim for a projector with high lumens counts, and that's basically to combat the ambient light in the room. A silver screen is recommended for this kind of a case scenario, and this is basically to bring out some more contrast and darker colors. If you have a dark room where lighting is controlled, such as mine, then you should get a projector with lower lumens count and a higher contrast ratio, since it won't need to compete with other lights in the room. The screen can be a brighter material to bring out the full color range. The exact fabric that I used was cinewhite from Elite Screens, and I'll provide a link below. So just for demonstration purposes, I originally bought an Epson 880 with a brighter 3300 lumens and 16,000:1 contrast ratio, as seen on the lower part of the screen. I then replaced it with an Epson 2250 with only 2700 lumens, but a 70,000:1 contrast ratio. We can clearly see the differences between a bright versus dark projector in my light-controlled room. Now for the screen assembly. I used a series of poles that I had left over from a previous project that I was able to screw together. However, you can use tent support poles as well. They're very lightweight, come in a series of lengths, and are very affordable. I'll also provide a link in the description for them. The purpose of these rods is to spread out the tension across all four sides of the screen evenly, and they slide right through the seams that my mom stitched together. For the upper part of the screen, I used some angled hardware to act as hooks for the poles. The bottom of the screen is what will be under spring force. To do this, I ran a few perforated steel angles across the bottom of the frame. I then used a series of eye bolts which I ran the lower poles through, installed a set of stiff springs I had left over from my RC racing days, and I used some washers and nuts to apply pressure evenly. For the horizontal stretch, I used a slightly different method. I used some tension springs and some mechanic wire and just tied everything together. This last addition to the screen is some felt tape. This is a non-reflective tape which absorbs light. We use this along the borders of the screen to prevent light from bleeding, and it also helps the overall look of the screen. To install our starlights, I used a 4x8 board. I scattered and marked about 200 spots in preparation for drilling. On the other side of the board, I used felt tape sheets. These are very difficult to lay evenly. The material stretches, and because I'm having to run 3 strips of it, getting them to seam together is very tough. So now comes the fun part. I'm having to drill out 200 holes to feed all the fiber cables through. These are very fragile, so when I'm using the hot gun, I'm using it on its lowest temperature, and I'm cooling off the tips as soon as inserted. After that, we just trim the tips of the fiber optic cables flush with the board, and we install it up on the ceiling. Now, although I just put in brand new floors, we want this to be a little tiny bit more cozy. So I opted for an affordable Ikea carpet and cut it to size. Also note that carpets help a lot with sound deadening, which is something I'll get into a little bit later. As mentioned, I'll be using an Epson 2250. It's a 1080p smart projector that I got refurbished, and I'll start by building the main brackets to mount the projector. I then use a laser to line up the rails with the center of the room. This is to ensure that the projector maintains alignment whenever it's moved into position. Seating. So this was a bit tricky. Due to the size constraints and geometry of the attic, I spent days looking for couches and love seats that would be comfortable enough to fit and suit the room. I measured every possible piece of furniture at Ikea with no luck, and then it dawned on me, what is leather, durable, and designed for continuous sitting arrangements? Car seats. And I was lucky enough to land a pair of mint condition BMW F30 seats. These are fully adjustable and came with all the modules. Since the factory mounting rails just didn't do it for me, we needed more support on the rear of the seats to prevent them from tipping back. I opted to design and build my own. I used some steel angle, punched some holes to give it some style, and I mounted them directly to the seats. I used 1-inch diameter feet to protect the carpet as well. To power up the seats, we of course need a 12-volt source. I had a 25 amp power inverter laying around from previous projects that I was able to use. So this was pretty straightforward to hook up. So now let's go ahead and test this. Everything checks out perfect. Which means now we can move on to one of the best parts of this theater build, and that is sound. Lots of sound. I originally tested audio using a Logitech Z906, but as I got further and deeper into this project, This sound system, although affordable because it was on sale at the time, it just did not deliver the crisp audio that is required for movies. This is more of a gaming sound system. So I got a bit carried away with this. I returned the Logitech and I gathered a set of 200 watt Polk audio towers off Kijiji with a free Pioneer receiver that the seller gave to me. I also picked up a refurbished 145 watt Sony center speaker as well as rears, and a brand new Klipsch 12-inch 400 watt subwoofer. Altogether, I now have a 5.1 surround sound system, which is more than enough for this little tiny attic, and I barely spent over $700 with everything combined. Since I want to keep everything minimalist and tidy, I'm gonna run all the wiring behind the walls. To accomplish this, I'm installing a set of brushed wall plates. These are really convenient for those who will be changing cables in the future without having to replace the wall plates every time. All the wiring was done using Amazon Basics 12 gauge wire. This is a 99.9% oxygen-free copper, which greatly reduces the corrosion in the long run. For connectors, I used a set of Banana 24K gold plated connector plugs. I didn't have the ability to run the wires behind the front wall, so I used this strip of J-mold and I installed it below where the screen mounts, and I just laid the wires within it. The front speakers will slide directly into the front corners, and as for the rear speakers, I had a set of speaker stands I built when I was in high school, so luckily they're at the perfect height and suit the project perfectly. So now that we have a good sound system, we gotta control it a bit. The small room does generate a bit of an echo, so I decided to use some sound deadening pads. Well, a lot of pads. 108 pads to be exact. I mounted these in various spots around the room using some foam boards as their backing, and then I just screwed them into the walls. These pads made a huge difference once installed. One last piece of the puzzle is media control. To accomplish this, I already had a full-time server that was used for other purposes, so I installed Plex server on it along with enough storage for all my movies. To access the content, I decided to use a Roku box connected through Ethernet on my network. This makes content management smooth and makes the whole theater experience seamless. And now we are officially done. Let's have a look at the finished product. All in all, I think this project worked out pretty well. The room is small and I managed to fit everything into a really tight budget, but the functionality, display, audio, and even down to the look came together perfectly. Now there's only one thing left to do, and that is enjoy my movies. And that about wraps it up for this project. I thank you guys for watching if you stuck through the entire thing. I'm going to be putting links in the description to pretty much all the items that I've used in this video. And the next video, we're gonna be right back in the garage because I got a brand new project that I pretty much just finished up. So stay tuned and thank you for watching Dark Blood Mechanical. I'll catch you guys next time.
I don't want friends, I want Audis. Smoking on booth and it's my weed. I check the bitch like I'm Mari. Sorry bitch, I don't say sorry.